Welcome to the Tuesday, April 27, 2021 meeting of the Long Meadow School Committee. Per Governor Baker's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A and 20, the public will not be allowed to physically access the school committee meeting. The school committee is using the Zoom meeting platform to conduct this meeting. LCTV is live streaming the meeting on Channel 12, and a recording of the meeting will be posted to the LCTV YouTube channel as soon as possible after the meeting. Just a reminder that all votes while participating remotely must be made by roll call vote. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the Republic which stands one nation, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Kevin, I see that we don't have correspondence listed for tonight. Is that correct? That's correct. So our next item would be approval of previous minutes, if anybody would like to make a motion.
Sorry. I move that the school committee approve the minutes for the April 13th, 2021 school committee meeting as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. Gianna?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Nicole?
Yes.
Bronwyn?
Yes.
Susie? Muted, Susie. You're struggling. Oh. Diane, does she have the ability to unmute? There we go.
It looks like I don't. I keep getting an error message saying I can't. But yes.
Thank you. Jamie?
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Yes for me too. Sorry, Diane. So that's 7. Visitor comments, as always, while we're doing remotely, if you could unmute yourself and let me know you'd like to speak. If you are a visitor here to speak tonight. Seeing none, we'll move on to school committee announcements and recognitions. Any announcements? Gianna?
Thank you, Ryan. I just wanted to take a moment. I'm seeing lots of proud parents and guardians sharing what their seniors are going to be doing next year, from traveling to college to careers, and it's just super, super fun and exciting, and just so happy for all of the seniors and their families.
Ted, thank you. Anybody else? Kevin?
Yeah, just a big shout out to everybody who has made it possible to get all the kids who want to come back able to come back and be in school. I know that we had recently had break, but I think a lot of our administrators were working hard, getting classrooms ready and making sure everything was ready for the kids to come back. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who made it possible to get all the kids back who wanted to come back.
Thank you. Anybody else? I'd like to take a moment to wish good luck to all the spring sport athletes that are the regular spring sport athletes that are getting going right now. Good luck, and hope that goes well for everybody. Anybody else? All right, moving on to business with guests. First thing I have on here, if we're going to go in order, is Mr. Landers with a NEASC update.
Face to you, and along with Mr. Landers is one of the co-chairs of the Commendations Steering Committee.
Excuse me, Marty, we can't hear you.
Oh, sorry about that. Try now. Can you hear me now? Anything now?
I muted myself to try to make it a little better, but I don't think it would work.
How about now?
Perfect.
All right. Sorry about that. So with us tonight, Mr. Landers, principal of the high school, along with Meredith Laughlin, who's the chair of the math department at Long Meadow High. Meredith is one of the co-chairs of the New England Association of Schools and Colleges Accreditation Steering Committee. And so pleased to provide the committee with an update on the report of the visiting team, which Tom and Meredith can dive into the details, but I would simply say that it is a reflection of the complexity of running a high achieving high school, and very proud that it reflects positively on all the great work that's happening at Long Meadow High School. But it also provides a clear path forward in some critical areas. So Tom and Meredith, thanks for joining us tonight. And as they present, I'll just pull up a one visual that hopefully will explain the accreditation cycle and the accreditation process. So Tom, take it away, and as you begin, I'll pull up that slide.
Thank you, Marty, and good evening to everyone on the committee. So we received, as you know, this is an ongoing process with NEASC. NEASC has they have no regulatory authority over us, but what they have is, for lack of a better explanation, kind of a good housekeeping seal of approval for accreditation. And they come in and they really put us under the microscope, and they ask us to put ourselves under the microscope as to what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it that way. And our virtual visit was on November 9th and 10th of 2020. And the visiting team made up of educators, from administrators to teachers to support staff, came and they interviewed and observed and sat in on classes, and they interviewed and parents and guardians and faculty and staff and students, and their focus on faculty and staff went beyond just teachers. They spoke to teachers. They wanted to hear from paraprofessionals, administrators, everything, and to try to get a feel of the culture of a school. So it was in depth. It was so much of the work had been done leading up to that visit, because our self-reflection report had to be turned in prior to that, at least 6 weeks prior to that. We turned it in, considerably earlier than that. But it was a good opportunity, and as Marty said, I certainly want to acknowledge the work of other people. Meredith Laughlin is here tonight. Meredith Laughlin and Michael Frammerin were the chairpersons of the committee. NEASC is very purposeful and intentional about the principal having to be part of this, but the principal and the assistant principals cannot run this. This has to be a report written by the faculty and organized with staff members alongside the principal. So in addition to Meredith Laughlin and Mike Frammerin, I also want to mention Mrs. Rita Hawker, Mark Cormier, Karen Reardon, Jessica Moore, and John Rossio has also added, joined the steering committee as of late, as Mrs. Hawker, the chairperson of our wellness department, is retiring this June. So it was thorough, it was reflective, and we received this report. We received an initial draft in mid-March, and the final draft, which was pretty close to the original draft, came, I want to say, in late March. And we read through it, and what we see is 43 pages of, for the most part, the visiting team agreeing with our reflection. I'm pleased to say that they gave us many commendations. I'll talk a little bit about that. They also gave us recommendations. But the good news is that of the 43 pages that you see in your report, I'm going to estimate that about 38 or 39 of them were written by us. They literally copied and pasted what we said, and they concurred with our self-reflection. So one of the things that they had us do was to identify priority growth areas. And as you see, we had self-identified things like the vision of the graduate has now been established and it's begun to be embedded, but we need to embed it more into what we do every day. We need to have it be a driving force in teaching and learning, and we need to come up with a meaningful way to measure it. They concurred with that. We identified that we need to do more work and do better work for our students in the areas of Tier 2 intervention and MTSS, multi-tiered support services. And they concurred with that. We identified that we wanted to continue to expand the definition of student success in terms of building more opportunities for students with career-related opportunities, job shadowing, internships, life-applicable experiences, capstone projects, and expand the pockets that we already have in terms of hands-on learning, whether they be in the social studies department with Action Civics, our community service learning class, our hands-on science classes and things like that. They also concurred with that, and they said, good job and keep going. And then lastly, we had identified the need for a postgraduate survey. And, that would ask former students questions about their academic experience, their overall experience of high school, their readiness for what they did post high school. In most cases, that's college, but not in all. And so they also concurred with that. And they also included several commendations, and then they included some recommendations. In addition to this report, I had some phone calls with the chairperson of the visiting committee, who's happens to be an assistant superintendent of learning in Rhode Island. And I just want to be upfront that the next steps are to create a growth plan. And he said, your growth plan should be made up of the 4 priority areas. And I asked him, well, do you also want us to include the recommendations? He said, not necessarily, but we are going to do that because it makes no sense not to. And if you look at the recommendations, 3 or 4 of them correspond, I think, directly with the priority areas, and the other things that they recommend are things that we care about and things that we want to do better and things that we want to include in that growth plan. So the next steps are so they're going to come back. They're going to come back and visit Long Meadow High School with a larger team. Instead of 4 to 5 educators, they're going to come back with 8 to 10. And they will do that in December of 2022. And before the fall, I am charged as principal with writing a growth plan that will incorporate the priority areas and the recommendations that they made. For the viewers at home, I'll just really quickly go through the recommendations and the commendations that will be added to the priority areas that I just touched on. So commendations, things we do well. They complimented us on the development of the vision of the graduate, how we did that we were, not only that we did that, but that we were inclusive of the community. They commended us on efforts to make LHS more equitable and inclusive. They commended us on the expansion of common assessments throughout the curriculum. We have common mid-years and common finals, but there are also other common experiences that we have worked on and have common assessments in certain academic subjects. They commended the high school on the formal and informal ways educators make use of reflection and feedback. And in the conversation with the chairperson, he specifically mentioned the fact that, it was clear that teachers ask students for feedback throughout the year and then at the end of the year, and that administrators ask teachers for their feedback at the end of the year in a formal way. They commended the commitment of the faculty, staff, and administration to students in general and to the school and to the focus of the school. They commended the wide variety of course offerings, and in the conversation, he specifically commended the annual commitment that the Department Chair Council, DCC, of enhancing courses and looking for what we can add and make more meaningful and what we may need to let go to make room for other opportunities. And then generally the wide array of co-curricular offerings, whether they be sports or clubs, activities, etc. And then on recommendations, originally there were 4, and after chatting, we actually proposed either a 5th or a combination of one of the 2, but the 5 recommendations are development and implement a plan to measure the vision of the graduate, the 6 competencies. Continue to expand the use of common assessments through the curriculum. We asked and let them know that we wanted to continue to work with Atlas. Atlas is our database where we keep information regarding the curriculum of every course, a skeletal outline, and we're adding to that, putting some meat on the bone of every single course and every single level at LHS. And those were created by teachers. So if 2 teachers teach a section of geometry, college prep 1, they get together and they created that map. If there were 3 teachers of United States history honors, they worked on that map to really work on students having a commensurate experience. So they added as a recommendation, continue to align the taught curriculum to ensure commonality of learning experiences. And even though they don't mention Atlas as the software specifically, that was mentioned in our conversation, and that's our database, our repository for that. For they asked for development and implement a structure to ensure that grading practices are aligned with the school's belief about learning. I had asked some clarifying questions about that, and that really had to do with making sure that goes back to making sure that the vision of the graduate competencies are embedded into the everyday activities, learning activities, experiences, and even assessments at LHS. And lastly, to complete the implementation of career readiness opportunities throughout the curriculum. And there are several things that we were doing. I think the most overt is the hiring of Erin Corbett to be the career counselor and to run our internship program and to really expand that and help that grow. So, like I said, the next steps are for me as principal to write that growth plan. It has to be in by mid-August. I anticipate that will be done much sooner than that. The goal is certainly to do that before we break for the year. And my hope is that within the month that will be written. But that will have in it the goals, the combination of priority growth areas that I just chatted about and about the recommendations. And I will try my best to get those into 4, 5, 6 goals that are digestible, that are clear, that are transparent, and that will have, in addition to the goal, very similar to a district improvement plan or a school improvement plan, it will have to have a goal. It will have to have a rationale for that goal. It will have to identify the person or persons responsible for seeing that through to fruition. It'll ask for information about time and resources needed, and it will ask for measurement evidence and what the outcome will look like. So any person could follow that and say, this has been accomplished, this is still in the process of being done, et cetera. I think what they've said to me, what they've reiterated is when they visit in December of 2022, they don't expect all of these things necessarily to be done, but they expect to see evidence that they're all underway. And many of these things are things that aren't, it's not just flipping a switch, it's embedding things, it's continuing to, improve the culture and improve the everyday practice. So that's an overview of the visit, the feedback by the visiting team, next steps. Meredith Laughlin did so much work on this. I don't want to put her on the spot, but I certainly want to give her a chance to share any insight from a teacher perspective and a department chair perspective, if she would like to add any thoughts or feelings about the visit or the report itself.
No, I would just say that the entire staff came together really nicely to write the report, to support the visit, and that next year ahead, we will, I'm sure, use faculty meeting time, department meeting time, perhaps professional development time if we are able to have that, to do some of the work of implementation to prepare for the 2022 visit. That will be the big visit, and it will include meetings with the committee and administration, students, teachers, and we'll continue the process to work toward our continued accreditation.
Thanks, Meredith. And the December 2022 visit will, as I said, it'll have a slightly larger group of educators visiting us. COVID will hopefully, by the grace of God, be gone, and they'll be here in person. We you know, the costs associated with that, they physically come. They come for, my understanding is 2 nights and 3 days, and they'll physically be in the school. They'll be in the classrooms. We will work to set them up with shadowing several students. They can interview any staff or faculty member, and they try to get a wide variety of employees to do that. They'll finish with, historically, they've come on a Sunday, and we meet them and we welcome them to the school, and then they generally have stayed for a Monday and a Tuesday evening, and they come to the school on a Wednesday, and they'll leave kind of halfway through the day on Wednesday. But we will welcome them. We will open our school to them and say, here's what we're proud of, here's what we've worked on, and here's what we continue to need to work on, and we'll ask for their feedback, their help, their insight, and then they will, that will be in December of 2022, and we would anticipate that there would be the final decennial report from that visit, hopefully by March of 2023, and it will certainly be made public, and hopefully we impress them as based on our work and our continued focus. So I'm happy to answer questions, clarify anything, but hopefully that was a summary to give you an idea.
And as the committee prepares some questions, which I'm sure they'll have some, I want to mention a couple of things. I hope the committee sense that the NAASC has sort of reinvented itself in recent years to make this more of a process that drives overall school improvement. It's become less of an accountability exercise and more of a way for schools to identify goals that can feed into school and district improvement efforts. So the other thing I'd mention is that to Mr. Lander's credit, to the administrative team's credit, to the accreditation steering team's credit, they engaged the entire school staff in this study, and they weren't required to do that. In fact, the NAASC had created a way to kind of streamline it and make it so that fewer people could be involved, but to add to the authenticity and to make it a school-wide effort, the full school staff was really contributing to this report. And I appreciate the willingness of the high school to sort of hold a mirror up to themselves to understand what's working and what could be some areas for growth. So it was a big effort that took place over a couple of years. So kudos to Meredith and her team, and to Tom and the administrators at the high school for working on this and bringing this report to fruition with the NAASC. So thanks, guys.
Thank you, Marty.
Marty, can you get rid of the slide so I can see everything? And who has a question? Gianna.
Thanks, Ryan. And yeah, thank you, Tom and Meredith, and like y'all said, your whole team and everybody that was involved. I had to sit on a couple years worth redesign turnaround leadership team for my school, so I know the intensity of those state in this case state visits and focus groups and all that stuff. So I truly appreciate all your effort and time and thought that y'all put into this. Congratulations, especially on the commendations. I know, looking through those, just fantastic effort and being recognized for that. I wanted to especially thank you though for the focus on the vision of the graduate as one of the priority areas, because, I think all too often in these, kind of, thinking about programs or thinking about, new initiatives or thinking about, trying to identify, successes and all that stuff for our learners. Sometimes, you get the kind of the program or the flavor of the month, and then it sits on a shelf with its pretty little, engaging graphics and language. So I'm glad to see in this case that, all of your years of working on that are going to continue and make it a priority, because I do believe in those skills beyond just kind of the words and the graphics that go along with them. So just really wanted to express my appreciation for your emphasis on that.
Thanks, Gianna. Thank you.
Anybody else? Kevin and Susie, you'll be next.
Yeah, again, I just want to thank everybody for their hard work on this. We've gone through some accreditations at Smith, and they're a lot of work. And if you put the time into them, you can get some really powerful things out. And it looks to me like that's where we're at. And again, thanks to everybody for all the hard work to make that possible. And I have two questions. One, I'm just curious, what is the slide Marty showed with the accreditation cycle? How long is that, right? I mean, what is our cycle for, we're going to do this and then they're going to have another visit, and then like, when do we go back into the cycle? So that's first question.
Sure. So I would say that the NEASC cycle historically used to be once every 10 years, and about 2 years before they visited, they would back to you and in preparation for their visit. Now, pretty much, I mean, it's an ongoing, there's a 10-year cycle, but pretty much there's something due and something to report on and something to focus on almost every year. And there's something always to focus on every year, but there's something to report back formally or do. So like we said, this was, to their credit, they added 2 visits. They used to come once. When they came, they sent a team of, 4 to 5 educators in November of 20. They'll have, 2 years later, almost to the date, they'll send 8 to 10 more to see how you did. We will write that report. And after we submit that report, and after they visit, they will submit a report to us. And then the school will have to do an initial report within the year, and then they'll have to do a 3 and a 5, and then you're getting ready for the next visit in the 10-year cycle. So they've made themselves more embedded in the life of a school. And I would agree with what Marty said. They are definitely trying, because there was some pushback on NEASC, because there's so many state regulatory realities that we're dealing with and we're serving and that we need to serve on the state and federal level. They have tried to reinvent themselves and tried to be more user friendly and tried to be more of a partner. So I felt that this time. This is my 3rd NEASC experience. I literally came in at the end of the last one. Superintendent O'Shea had done a lot of work on that last one as an assistant principal, his way out the door. Most of that work had been done by the faculty, so I was in on the LHS one, and then at my former district I was in on one, and I have to say this was the most collaborative experience that I had in this. It felt a lot more like they were there to help you. They weren't there in a gotcha kind of way, and it was intense to prepare for, and it's always somewhat anxiety causing to have people looking over your shoulder and see what you do. But they went out of their way to really try to be partners and try to be supportive, and I felt that, and we heard the same thing from students and families and faculty.
Well, that's helpful, Tom. Thank you. And I guess the second question I have is, I would just love to hear you or others speak to, like, how can the school committee help through this process? What things can we do to support the work that you're doing with respect to the accreditation process.
Sure. Mrs. Laughlin, do you want to have a shot at it? I have some answers, but do you want to go? Do you want to add anything?
No, feel free. Take it away, Tom.
Okay. I would say that in that, I think that you have been supportive, and I think that we've kept you in the loop, and we want to continue to do so. I think that NEASC growth plan that I referred to, one of the columns there is time and resources as needed to achieve the goal. So, you've already supported the creation of the position of a career a career teacher to work on not only internships and be the driver of that, the organizer and the facilitator of that, but also she can do other things to support college and career readiness and career awareness while in the classroom. So that's an area that position is going to help. That position is going to support the capstone efforts that I would anticipate will be embedded in several departments, but I think the English department has a particular interest for that. Senior year, second semester is a kind of a no-brainer place for a capstone culminating project. Every single student experiences that class. And that's a way that you can create this interdisciplinary project that involves things like individual passion of a student, real life applicability, presentation skills, not only presenting to a teacher in a class, but presenting to some kind of public entity. That position is also going to be an organizer of helping to get community members and regional members to sit in front of members and regional members to sit in front of and listen and give feedback to students. It's a huge growth area for students. So that's something that you have helped with, and continued support for that position is essential. I think that, one of the goals already, and it's part of the budget, but one of the school committee helps with the budget in numerous ways. There is already a plan for us. We started an expanded Tier 2 program at the high school this year. We learned from it. We learned what worked and what could be better. And so the plan next year is to have it expanded. And the plan next year is to have a classroom where every single block students can be referred to and get direct support in areas of English and reading and writing and math, on Algebra 2 and geometry, and general organizational skills. I think we do a really good job. We're never perfect. We try to be perfect, but I do think we do a good job for our students on individualized education plans and 504s, but very often this student center will service those students, but it'll also service regular education students that sometimes fall through the cracks. So that's a huge part of that priority area that we identified, the expansion of Tier 2 multi-tiered systems of support. And then, in terms of the other things that we want to do, I think that the cost is built into the existing budget, but there might be times, I think Meredith said it, and the superintendent is helpful in this area. We have to carve out time ourselves at the high school for, faculty time and department time, but he is also helpful in terms of giving us some time, when we need it on a professional development day. We had some of that when we focused on April 1st on the PD Day. Most of it was focused on anti-racism and most of it was focused on inclusivity and equity, but we also made sure to have Meredith and Mike Framrin lead a session for every single employee on embedding the VOG into it, because we don't want to treat it as a separate entity. We want to embed it into everything that we're doing. So if we're talking about equity and inclusivity, we also want to talk about the personalization of education, and that fit nicely. So, but we have to do more work on that. And we have ideas that are percolating in terms of how to best measure the VOG and professional development time and department time and faculty time is a resource, and that's also helpful. And there are different ideas about potentially, do we have students? I think that there's an energy pointing towards having students self-reflect on their own growth in the 6 areas. I don't know exactly how that's going to look, but there might be some costs associated with that. I don't think that they're extraordinary, and I to be honest, I think it can be covered within the existing LHS budget. But there are some interesting software tools that could be used for that, or we could do we could have work with our IT team and maybe do that internally. But I do think that there needs to be some kind of electronic repository for students to reflect on how I have grown as a student in my independence, in my accountability, in my communication. How have I proved that I've been more collaborative than I used to be? How do I prove that I'm a better communicator? How do, from any experience in their life, how do they, in their school experience, how have I become a critical thinker and a problem solver? So that's really the work that we're focusing on. And I think that whatever we do in terms of measurements, I think that it's going to include student reflection. It means more, in my opinion, and in the professional opinion committee and the faculty so far, and the dialogues are on, can't say that we want learning to be student-centered and then we're the only evaluators. So the English department has done a really nice job with asking students to be self-reflectors on their own writing, and they do that as the mid-year exam, mid-year experience. Everyone does that, and everyone builds a portfolio and says, here's an old piece of my writing, here's a current piece of my writing, and here's what I did better in this one, and here's what I'm going to try to do better of in the future. So I think we're going to try to incorporate those concepts into measurement of the BOG. So I hope that it's a really long answer to a short question, Kevin, but that's my most honest answer. So the support you've given already has been helpful, and I think the rest of it can be executed within the existing budget.
Thank you. Susie, you were next.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Actually, I think you addressed my question in the last few comments in talking about the vision of the graduate, because that is, that can be either taken as an exercise in, well, let's just get this done and tick the boxes, right? Or it's how can we ensure that it's actually part and parcel of what we do. And I recall actually from, gosh, I don't know how long ago this was. COVID has totally changed my frame of time at this point. But there was a meeting we had where I think you unveiled the vision of the graduate, and you talked about the possibilities. And it was our student representative at the time who said, I remember it quite clearly because of the way he approached it. He said, does this mean we'll be able to do projects that we're actually really interested in to prove that we've met these competencies? And that still sticks with me to this day, obviously. Right. I think it was Breggy, right? Is that who it was?
Yep.
And so, that leads me to exactly what you're trying to do. How do you embed it both in what you do, and then how do you ensure that students feel like what they're able to do within the classroom is truly what they're passionate about? That leads to those competencies. That's my overarching question. Not looking for an answer. It's really more, it sounds like you're on a road to doing that. I just wanted to insert that last sort of framework from that student perspective that we received during that meeting. And if I'm off on that, please somebody tell me. But I seem to recall that from that meeting.
No, I think that's exactly correct. That the vision of the grad formerly had as school-wide expectations for learning, and that did become kind of a check the box effort, and we don't want this to become that. and the work of capstones that we're excited to have colleagues develop, and the time over the next year to continue to work on how we're going to best measure the vision of the graduate is going to be a lot of work, but we want to do it in a meaningful way. And I'm kind of pleased with NEASC's outlook that we will implement the growth plan, and we'll have to write a summary report on what we've done in the next 9 to 12 months before the visit in 22. And then we don't have to be done like Tom said. We'll then the growth plan and continue to implement the growth plan for that 3-year progress report, and then we'll update the growth plan and implement the updates for the 6-year progress report and be getting ready for the next collaborative conference. So it really is that cycle that was on the screen.
Artie, you had something to add?
Yeah, I appreciate the way Susie captured that, because I do remember that same meeting, and to see that sort of light bulb go off over Breggy's head was really interesting. And I think what, as I think about this from a K-12 perspective, I feel like the whole, if we embrace the VOG, it really lines up nicely with the emphasis on standards-based teaching and learning, which is fully developed at the elementary level, and which is at its early stages at the middle level. And, in a standards-based environment where students are focused on developing their competencies against a set of skills, and there's a lot of opportunity for self-reflection. It really fits nicely with what Tom has described and what Susie had mentioned as well. So I think it fits really well with that. I think it also fits well with our emphasis on equity and inclusivity, where we want a child's experience to be personalized. We want that experience to match their interests, their passions, their backgrounds, and all of those things promote engagement. And so that's another thing that I really like about the emphasis on the vision of the graduate. And Meredith said it well. It's the old approach with the expectations for student learning. It really became almost a game where you're checking boxes on a spreadsheet. And this is so much more authentic and so much more real. So I'm very excited about this work.
Thank you. Anybody else with a question? I have one about grading. Get into the nuts and bolts a little bit. I hope it's all right, but I have a quick question about the aligning of grading practices. I'm wondering if it's the type of thing, I know you mentioned, Tom, that it's going to fit in with the vision of the graduate. Is it the type of thing where people are grading compliance over mastery of standards, and how it varies from teacher to teacher? Say a kid has 8 different teachers with 8 different practices. One teacher takes off 20 points if something's late. So an 80 looks like the kid only knows 8 out of 10 of the things, but in fact, they might know all 100 of them. They might know 100%, but they were late. So the grade actually doesn't reflect their ability to do the work. Or is it some other topics? I'm just curious about the specifics, because I love getting into discussions about how we assess and grade kids.
So they weren't as specific as you were just now, but I think part of the focus of the full embedding of the vision of the graduate, not only measuring it, but also making sure that it's the driver of, and they specifically say in there, of teaching and learning, and they mention assessment in there. If you see, in the report, we have come so far in terms of, in the last decade, LHS has always been an impressive school, but I will be honest with you, there was a much greater chance of a student experiencing what I would call educational roulette. Like if you landed on this teacher, you had one experience, and if you landed on another teacher, you could have a completely different. I don't want to pretend that we want to make every single teacher a mirror image of each other, but we have come so far, and we need to continue to move that needle. I think that the atlas that I referred to, I think that the common mid-year exam and or experience, because we, that we give an opportunity for a traditional exam, but that has really given way, to, or you could have that or a common experience. That common experience is not only common, but it's getting away from a traditional exam and having a student also prove what she or he can do or can, knows and what can do and application based. I think those are steps in the right direction. And the final exam, and they're pushing us, Ryan, to do more of that, both in terms of saying, if you teach this class, I don't care what it is, we happen to use Atlas. We don't care what repository you use, but we want what you put in that Atlas to reflect what's going on in that classroom to a great degree. Doesn't mean that a teacher's not going to bring his or her own style and sense of humor. We want that. That's part of life, and that's preparing students for professors and bosses in real life and different experiences. But we certainly want to continue to do that. So, and the last thing I will say about assessment is, to the credit, and I give the math department credit for this. I give the English department credit for this, the world language department for credit for this. In particular, is they have engaged in blind correcting activities. And that is, and that's straight out of the College Board and AP, but it's not just for the College Board and AP. But I think that is when you cross a student's name off and you have a department people sit around and say, what would you give for this project and why? What would you give for this essay and why? How many math department in particular, is known for giving, any good math teacher is known for giving partial credit. Well, you didn't get the final answer correct, but you did these segments correctly. And it's building on each other. So I think that's part of it. I think the blind correcting and a continued dialogue about what is authentic assessment this year has been an experiment in assessment. This year has been, a huge trial and error and a huge experiment in that realm. And I think that this year will mixed with the challenge of what we have in front of us from NEASC will continue to push assessment to be more and more project-based, but also getting back to how do you judge that? You don't want to rubricize every single assignment, but rubrics are really helpful. They're helpful at the beginning of the project for the student to guide him or her as what to do, and then it's a very detailed feedback form saying 100 points were available, you earned 87, and here's how and why you earned them. It's really, really important. So it's something we are working on, something we've made a lot of progress on, but it's something I think you need to continue to do.
Thank you. Anybody else with any other questions? I don't see any. Where's my agenda? Lhs Student Handbook is next up. So a big thank you for the NEASC report. We look forward to seeing where that all goes. It's very interesting stuff. It's always fun to see that examined. So thank you for the report, and the committee looks forward to seeing the next one. You're muted, Marty.
Thank you both. Appreciate it. So next.
Marty, I guess it's me.
Yeah, that's it. So Mr. Duckerly, assistant principal at the high school, with a handful of changes to the 9-12 student handbook. I'll mention that we also have a K-8, a unified K-8 student handbook. And at some point before the end of the year, we'll bring some changes from that handbook to you as well. But for your review and approval are the handbook changes that Mr. Dunkerley will present, and there's a copy of that report in your packet as well. Want to take it away, Paul?
Sure, thanks, Marty, and good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for the opportunity to make this presentation. So as you can see from the information in your packet, we've laid out the proposed changes to the handbook, providing with both the existing and the proposed language. So the actual number of proposals is a lot shorter than it would appear from the, I think, 4.5 pages. I do want to just take a moment and acknowledge the work of the committee members. Each year we solicit, every member of the student body and every member of the faculty and invite them to join in on this committee. It is literally open to everybody. And we're fortunate that people every year step up and participate. And I'd just like to acknowledge the work of the committee members this year: Rhea Sandler, Rachel Schwartz, Jonah Baresi, Katie Goodhines, Ryan Molderig, all of whom are students, and Catherine Giampetro, who's one of our special education teachers. And it's my job to chair the committee. All of them for stepping up and participating. So not only do those students and faculty members bring the thoughts and concerns that they have, whether it's something they have personally or things they've heard from, their constituents, so to speak, but we also solicit the entire faculty and the entire body and ask them for anything that they would like the committee to consider. So in doing so, we hope that we are including our entire student community and our community in participating and improving the handbook and what we do in terms of content of the handbook to benefit the students overall. So what you see in front of you is the culmination of that. And of course, the committee is just a recommending body. And once our recommendations are put together and formally presented, it goes to our council next, which is what's required by Ed Reform of '93. We have discussions there, and then they have the ability to make recommendations and changes as well. And then it comes forward to the principal and to the school committee. So that's a quick overview of the process. And if it's okay with you, Marty, and the members of the school committee, I'll just briefly touch on each item. Is that okay? Okay. Thanks, Marty. So the first 2 pages are devoted to the dress code. And it really boils to this. The dress code had an item in there, number 6 on the original, that read as follows. Legs should not be exposed above fingertip length when it stands with arms fully extended downward. And if you think about it, that is really kind of one of those things that is really hard to enforce. And the students actually brought this one to light. And as we discussed it, we felt that just eliminating that clause as a standalone altogether made sense. And in partnership with the school committee, what we decided was that the existing number 11, the existing number 10, excessively short or tight garments are prohibited, really covered that and gave enough structure so that we could work with the code without it being something that it was unenforceable. So the only change that's proposed is the elimination of item 6, that kind of measurement item, and again driven from the students. So I guess would it be easier if I take questions on an item by item basis, or would you rather just have me go through everything and then go to questions?
I think my thought would be if we go by section, then the questions might make more sense, and then you don't have to go back and forth. So you want some questions right now about the dressing and grooming section, if anyone has one?
Brian, if there are any, I'm happy to answer them before I move on.
Great. Gianna?
Thanks, Ryan, and thanks, Paul, and the students and everybody else involved with this effort. This probably, I'm not saying we need to have this discussion now, but in the future, however that process works, the dress code, and maybe this is just building awareness around the dress code as it stands, because I feel like it's a little stilted towards male. I guess I should say, so I have a son who's, at the high school. I have a daughter who's at the high school. My son could care less about fashion. My daughter's trying to work out her fashion. And, when she wears something and I'm kind of like, are you supposed to wear that? She's her insight and she's right. The problem shouldn't be if I have a problem with what she's wearing, you know, I want her to feel comfortable in what she's wearing. So in the age of, you know, body shaming, in the age of wanting people to be comfortable, you know, and especially with, you know, females and maybe non-binary students, I'm concerned about everything being not wearing something that's distracting to others, not wearing something that feels unsafe to others. Like, you know, I think we're going to have a conversation about how the dress code is put forth moving forward. You know, it's kind of like along with like when people talk about like, you know, when young women are assaulted, you know, well, what were they wearing? You know, we really should be teaching the assaulter not to do that, you know, like, and I know this is a bigger conversation, but I just was really feeling it when I was reading that dress code and thinking everything is about who should not do this and who should not do this. And I think we just are going to have some kind of conversation about teaching people, you know, not to think a certain way. Like if she wears something that I look at and I'm like, oh, it's kind of revealing, like her intent isn't to be revealing and distracting. Her intent is that it's comfortable for her. So why should my problem with it, you know, impact her from wearing it? I don't know if I'm articulating this very well, but I just think there's going to have to be, or I would propose that there's going to have to be a bigger conversation about the dress code piece of the handbook.
Go ahead, Marty.
So one of the things, I think Gianna makes a, still?
Oh, you're good.
I'm good, okay. One of the things that we could take a look at, the school committee dress code policy was revised in 2019, and it eliminated a lot of the language that Gianna's talking about, and it's much more succinct, and it simply says that the attire cannot be destructive to school property, has to comply with the requirements for health and safety, doesn't create disorder or disruption, and meets the standards included in the handbook. So if the committee wanted us to, you know, next year, as the handbook cycle comes back up, take a deeper dive on the dress codes, and perhaps it would involve simplifying it further, which I think has happened in recent years with the high school and the K-8 dress code, and we're trying to take a lot of the gender-specific language out of there, and I think that was part of the effort with the proposal here tonight. But if that's something that the committee would like us to take a deeper dive on, or perhaps it's something we could refer to policy sub at an upcoming meeting.
Marty, can I just,
Go ahead, Tom.
I just want to add, I just want to reiterate what Marty said. So a few years ago, if you compared this, I agree, Gianna, and you know, here's the thing about dress codes. They're an administrator's nightmare, and they could be a rabbit hole. We had a good, healthy, robust dialogue about this at our school council, but and one of the things we've tried to do over the last few years is to get rid of gender-based language. I mean, there used to be the word cleavage in there. That was certainly sexist. There used to be actual verbiage in there until we purposely took it out a few years ago about naming females should not wear this, or females length, and we got rid of that. And I think that, you know, our effort tonight was to try to further work on that. You know, there was a sentence that was suggested to include like fingertip lengths. No, as Mr. Dunkley said, no one's is asking anyone to measure fingertips. So it's unenforceable and it doesn't reflect what we do, but it also had kind of a sexist feel to it. So we got rid of it. But on a positive note, I will say excessively short shorts for males are back in style. So I do want to clarify that sometimes, you know, even though it may appear, some of the things that are there may appear to be female centric, honestly, We talked to males as well about pants hanging down or wearing a half shirt, maybe an athletic see-through half shirt. A football shirt, practice shirt, jersey comes to mind. But we're committed to that, Gianna, and that was our goal a few years ago, and that's what we're continuing to try to work towards. So we're on the same page about wanting that outcome.
Yeah, and thank you all, and I guess maybe too, I probably should have again said it better, but I'm not so much worried about like the language in it, but maybe kind of the underlying message. And so maybe if the wording stays the same, but maybe in wellness class, every the beginning of the year there's a conversation around this is the dress code, but it doesn't necessarily mean like you have the right to look at somebody's shirt and be like, ooh, I think there's a bigger message, and maybe it's just that conversation has to happen around the dress code, as it exists. I just think it's those underlying messages of, if somebody's wearing something, then they're the problem, when really it's the problem is created by somebody who's perceiving it in a certain way that it wasn't intended. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Any other specific questions? I think I'd agree on the idea that continuing to look at this is probably relevant. Two that jump out at me that I'd just like to mention as you continue to look at these. Wearing hats to public buildings is generally considered inappropriate. I'm just curious by whom it's generally considered inappropriate. I think I go in buildings all the time and see hats constantly. From a safety point of view, you may say removing hats is helpful because we have cameras, we need to see your face, we need to know who's doing what and going where, just for the general safety of everybody, but inappropriate seems a little old-timey. And number 9, excessively tight garments. On behalf of my daughter, who's now a graduate, to many girls, leggings are pants, and there's nothing tighter. So are those illegal according to this? Because I know my daughter would have been in trouble because leggings and sweatshirts for 4 straight years was probably her uniform.
And I'm guessing no one spoke to her about that. No, leggings are
not that I know of. No,
leggings are part of the American landscape. Absolutely.
Yep. So it just makes me similar to what Gianna said. It makes me wonder about some of the language. But, Nicole, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you guys for taking the time to continue going over this. I also would like to just continue as we move forward, the same kind of idea. Some of the ones that jumped out at me were similar to the ones that you mentioned, Ryan, and that the word excessive is so subjective, and what that might translate to is often subjective in different ways based on the presenting gender of the person that is potentially violating this dress code. So just things to consider as we move forward, and I appreciate the offer for us to keep looking at that in the future.
Okay, thanks, Paul. You want to move on to the courses?
Sure. Thanks very much. And by the way, thank you for your input. I've got to tell you that the dress code is something that students and faculty alike, administrators as well, it's an area where we tread kind of lightly. There is a feeling to move it back to policy sub and take a look at it and maybe bring it back out with some recommendations for us. We would welcome that. Course selection. So this is not really easy. I think we missed it last year, to be honest with you. As you know, we transitioned from the traditional physical education department to the wellness department, but on this particular page, we never changed physical education to wellness. So that is the one and only change that we're asking there. It's just a change existing to reflect what we've already been doing for the last couple of years now. So questions on that one?
I don't see any.
All right, and then great. So the next one was a paragraph that said all electric devices. And as we know, the landscape of school changed this year with computers going into a pandemic last year. And then obviously we've been one this year. this was written around the fact that we had a lot of students who, by design, were using cell phones or other personal electronic devices in class. And now that we've afforded the students the opportunity for everybody to have a Chromebook, it really didn't apply the way it was written anymore. So again, this was brought forward by a student who said, hey, I think we need to amend this to reflect the fact that we've taken a step ahead. We're a one-to-one district, and it shouldn't be all electronic devices anymore. We should reword some of this and gear it toward personal electronic devices. So if you look at it, the language is actually very, very similar, with the exception that we've just made it personal electronic devices as opposed to all electronic devices. Trying to draw a distinction between what the school is requiring in the Chromebooks, et cetera, and what students may be bringing and then potentially using for personal use rather than an educational use sanctioned teacher. So any questions on that one?
Bronwyn?
Thank you. I'm just curious, is it limited to just phones?
Bronwyn, actually, students wrote this up. We had that discussion, and they talked about not only phones, but smartwatches, tablets, why they took the approach of personal electronic devices. We talked about things like, would it be personal cell phone or things like that. They thought covered it all, and I quite frankly agree. I think they did a nice job. I got to tell you, the language here was actually completely developed by the students.
No, I think that's great. I'm just a little bit confused. Can a student use their own computer?
So yes, student can use their own computer. We do highly encourage them to use the Chromebooks because some of the applications that we're using in class or some of the we're doing are more easily accessed on the Chromebook. You know, that was one of the things that we did to help standardize the experience for students. Just like we made Classroom was kind of the basis for all of the for the electronic repository, if you will, for all of the information. But yes, you can, but the still is appropriately.
So this, I can pull it up. I won't have the screen in front of me, but this seems like it's saying all electronic devices, all personal electronic devices, which would include computers. So I just want to make sure that, the teachers are on the same page in terms of all electronic devices, because technically that would be like a student's own computer, which I think it's, as you said, if the Chromebooks are useful, but if they can do some stuff on their own computer and they choose to do that, and the teacher is fine with it, it seems okay, but this seems to indicate that it's all of them.
I'll take a shot at it if I could. I think the
Yeah, I was gonna, Marty,
yeah.
I missed the last half of that. Unfortunately, Brian, when you broke up pretty badly.
The default is that the students need to use school issued computers now that we're in a one-to-one environment. And so there's a number of reasons for that. Mostly it relates to device management, and it relates to some of the filtering that we're able to put in place on school managed devices. So that's the default. If for some reason a child needs to use their own personal device, whether it be a computer or a phone, that would require permission. And in the case of a phone, teachers would grant that permission. In the case of a student regularly using their own laptop, that's something that I think we would want to run that through the administrators at each building.
But it's currently the policy at the high school. It just seems a bit extreme to me, telling kids they can't use their own computers. I get it with the phones, things like that, but if they're doing their schoolwork on their own computers. It seems like a bit of an overreach to me.
Again, I think it has to do with on the school managed devices. Those are the devices that we can push out software, whether it's software to learning software, or perhaps it's software to manage web interaction and be sure that we're compliant with the federal internet protection requirements for children. So there's a number of reasons why we think it's important for kids to use their own, to use school issued computers, but that wouldn't rule out or preclude a child from using their own home device. But I think we just would want to understand the reasons for it. Is there a particular learning need? Is there something about the curriculum? Is there something about access to files? So we wouldn't disallow it, but if it is going to be allowed, I think it would be something that we would just want to engage the administrators on.
Can I just ask Maxim a quick question? Thanks. Maxim, I was just wondering, do all of the students currently use the Chromebooks only?
Not all. I think anyone who has a laptop usually uses their laptop. It's faster and such. My laptop beginning this year, so I have been using my Chromebook. It works just fine. But for those that have a Mac or something like that, it's easier. Another area, I did a lot of computer science classes. Chromebooks are not the best for computer science in my experience. So a lot of times, especially in anything that requires specifics like software, computer science classes, I know people like to bring their own computers. But other than that, anyone who doesn't have a laptop or something from home, they use their system.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Bronwyn, can I just add one kind of context, getting away from the computer usage, but just more on the general academic honesty issue? I just want to reiterate. So policies are necessary. We need them. Obviously, you need a handbook approach and clarity, but I just want the committee to know, and I think you do know, but I want parents at home, to know as well, that there's a full court press in addition to policy. There are dialogues and discussions, formal ones, and in most classes we ask everyone to do it, but classes and in the library media center, there's a formal lesson about plagiarism, original work, documenting resources, proper citing of sources, and not only do we try to teach that and talk about that, but there's also, the warning and the research paper on this is not that old. It used to go right to a punishment. It used to go right to a consequence, and we want to give an opportunity for a learning experience. So I just want to know that too, because policies are good, they're important, they're necessary, but I also want the committee to know that there's a teaching aspect, a formal teaching aspect through the library and media center and through our ELA classes about academic honesty and dishonesty and citing of sources. And it's an ongoing thing. Most of our students are going on to college and university, and we want them to know that. We want them to be prepared. We want to be intellectually honest with them about what they're going to face. So, but I want you to know that there's that educational aspect, and that even if you do, engage in it that first time, we try to work some kind of research and learning experience from that. It's really important in this area.
I just want to add, I totally agree. I wasn't disagreeing at all with the academic dishonesty thing. I was just inquiring about the use of different laptops.
Right. I just not just for you, but for everybody, and even people at home, I just want them to know that we formally teach that. We didn't used to formally teach it in any kind of structured way, but I'd say about 5 or 6 years ago, we kind of put a full court press on it. It's important to do, and And quite frankly, the research shows that at high achieving high schools, there's more pressure on students to engage in academic dishonesty than there are at, non-high achieving high schools. So it's just something we're committed to, and I think it's pertinent to the general dialogue we're having. I just wanted the committee to be aware.
Thanks, Tom. I have a question about whether or not teachers are on board with a little common sense regarding the line about the phone hotels. So, for example, if I have a cell phone and I'm carrying a backpack and my cell phone is in my backpack, the way this reads is the teacher has the right to tell me to take it out of my backpack and put it in their phone hotel. But if I spend an entire block of not touching my phone, am I left alone? Or am I not left alone? Just curious if the phone hotel thing is used in the personal experience for Maxim, I think.
I think in not all classrooms utilize the phone hotel. Experiences, not even most. But in the classes that do, I think it just becomes a habit, right? To be in class, I don't think any students are complained, and if they do, no one really keeps their phone backpack. Realistically, everyone keeps it in the pocket anyway. But everyone kind of gets to the habit. Some classes just use hotels. Some just say stack it on just like line a whiteboard. Yeah, I mean, if everyone just gets into the habit of it in the first week or so, what happens? And I've never seen it be a problem where someone says, "Oh, it's in my backpack. I'm not going to put it there." Yeah.
I'm just curious. That's what I was curious about. If it doesn't go off and it's not being used, would it be asked for? Do we know, or do we not know?
I know of no case.
I don't know. It's a fine answer. I'm just curious.
I know of no case where if it's away and off, no teacher is going to know that it exists. And just want to clarify, we don't use this year with crazy COVID rules. We don't have that. But in a normal year, Maxim is right. We have a lot of teachers who use them. It was a pretty challenging issue, but our students have been great, and they have been compliant and helpful, and the phone hotels have helped. But other teachers say, I don't want to collect it. I keep it off, keep it away. And you got to remember, other teachers, the policy is also, the teacher can say, and they do say, if you have a phone and if you want to take it out and use it to do this calculation or to do this research, you can do that. I think it's just, we try to come up with a common sense policy, and no policy is perfect, but it really works. We had so many phone issues back when I was an assistant principal, way back when, and we have had every year it's declined, and our students deserve credit for that. Our teachers deserve credit. So I think we have a pretty common sense, but no, we don't want to go searching bags, and teachers do not search bags. So if it's not being used and it's not supposed to be used, if it's off and it's away, I know of no teacher that has ever asked a student to open up their backpack. That would be something that the principal would not want to have to deal with or take the call from the parent on.
Right, I would think that.
Right.
Fake phones, that's what they're for the phone hotel. Anybody other have a
just to add one more thing
go ahead,
to
Paul.
that actually, sure. I was just going to say that actually, and one of the things the students pointed out and said, well, this year with COVID and with the fact that everybody has a school issued device, phones really aren't new. And as chatted about it, the committee agreed in general, we wanted to leave the flexibility to have the phone hotel in place in case it was needed. So again, student driven in terms of that particular part of the conversation. But again, this year, the issues with the use of phones in class, I can honestly say that I can't think of one. There may have been one or two, maybe my partner handled them, but it has worked. So we think we're in pretty good shape with this.
Great, thank you. So the next item is the academic dishonesty, which was touched on a little bit by Tom. I don't know, Paul, what you want to talk to us there about?
Sure. Thank you, Ryan. So again, Tom gave me a great segue for this. So thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. So this, again, was one of those things that was completely driven. They brought this up as an item for discussion. And one of the things that the students, I think, appropriately recognized was the fact that what we saw this year with COVID could be part of a paradigm shift in how education is delivered. So they said, maybe teaching isn't going to be the way it traditionally was 2 years ago. And maybe there's going to be people that are doing things remotely. Maybe they're going to be accessing things from home. And they wanted to cover that because that needed to be covered in terms of the different teaching modalities. But they also recognized the fact that we were having a bigger challenge this year. And I know Max the committee about this as well, where some people, particularly those at home, were unfortunately engaging in higher levels of academic dishonesty. And students were keenly aware of that. And I can tell you, at least the students on our committee were very frustrated by that there were some individuals who were, I'm going to take advantage of being at home and maybe having the ability to do things and to access things that a student in a classroom wouldn't be able to. So this was the way that the students wanted to address this and to make sure that we had something in place going forward so that it spelled it out very clear as needed. And I thought it was very thoughtful on the part of the students. And I think it speaks to the integrity of our overall student body about what the, so we added a little bit of language that just talked about where the consequences are for academic dishonesty, and just added line specifically to, that this applies to regardless of what the learning modality is, whether you're in person, whether it's hybrid, whatever. Everybody is clear in the fact that the playing field is level in terms of what is required from an academic honesty standpoint. And I guess lastly, I would say this, that our teachers, because we ran into this issue, have worked incredibly hard this year to try and address it. I know one teacher, this is maybe a little extreme, this particular individual has 4 different versions of every test. I know of another teacher who included an oral exam portion to help combat this. And there have just been so many efforts to try and make sure that we can hold everybody to the same standard, whether they're in the classroom or at home, to make sure that the grades that they are earning reflect of what they truly have mastered. So, my hat's off to the teachers and to the students, all of whom have worked really hard on this. And I think the end result is, and I think Maxim reported this last time, Maxim, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we're hearing far less about this. And I can tell you that from my perspective, we're hearing far less because there's far less of it happening. The message has gotten out there. The efforts of the teachers have been, I think, yielding positive fruit. And I think more than anything, their fellow students about what's right and what should be and shouldn't be, I think has gotten out there as well. I would give the students as much credit as anybody for having turned the tide on this. But again, the students wanted to make sure that we codified this, that we made sure that we were really clear going forward. So that's the rationale.
Thank you. Any questions? Susie?
Thank you for clarifying that. I think, and thank you to the students, obviously, for, I don't know if I'm the only one on the committee who's recently received an email from students who are researching in their civics action class about academic pressures. And it continues to concern me. I know I hear about this in the work that I do with schools across the country and around the world, that academic stress and strain is absolutely very real. And a lot of it is tied to the expectations that, we have around college admissions and things like that. But it's all tied, it all comes back to grades and competition that is so blown up and out of proportion almost amongst the students. And I'm concerned that, it concerns me that a teacher has gone to the lengths of creating 4 different versions of a test when could we be thinking more about, authentic application of learning that isn't, test driven, but it's something real where the student actually has to exhibit a skill in a real and new nuanced way, understanding that this year everybody was trying something new. Like please, let me clarify that. But I guess my question is, if we're really going to get to the heart of the matter around why students feel they have to cheat, then we need to start looking at not the symptom, but what's the cause. And that's what I leave you with. And the fact that I've been asked, and some of the other members have been asked about our perspectives on academic pressures facing students, this just goes hand in hand with it. Why are they resorting to academic dishonesty? I think it's a larger conversation we're going to have, and hopefully the students will bring their findings forward that they've been, relative to the conclusions that they draw for this research project.
Yeah, Susie, I think you're absolutely correct. That is a reality that our students face, and I think it's a in high-performing high schools where there's a significant expectation that kids are going to go off to college, and there is this feeling, just community, it's a lot of communities, there's some status as to what colleges our kids are going to, how do they get in, so on and so forth. That's true. Still have a lot of kids who, they're looking at their GPA all the time because they are having, they're feeling this pressure. I would also say this, one of the other things that teachers have done this year, a lot of, is they've gone to many more authentic style assessments. There aren't any regular, what I'm going to call paper and pencil tests anymore. Obviously, certain classrooms lend themselves to that better than others, but we have done more of that, and we expect that trend to continue because I think our teachers have found that there is great value in that. So that has been another method on which work to combat this by making things more authentic. So if you look at an English class, for example, you're not seeing anywhere near the number of traditional assessments in there, but rather it's more project-based or reflective in nature that students are doing. Yeah, there's still work to be done there. There's no question.
I think it goes back to that VOG conversation, that the more we're, give kids opportunities to focus on their competency and to reflect on their competency and growth as learners, and the more you're putting them in a position where they're, creating original, authentic projects, then, you take away the conditions that cause them to cheat. And so I think as we see that commitment to the VOG grow, perhaps we'll see, that we're attacking the symptom as Susie suggests.
Yeah, as someone who teaches college classes that relies on students being able to take exams, I want to just talk in favor of exams. That is a critical thing that our students have to be ready to take exams in college. Exams aren't going away. But I also think I've seen some encouraging things this year where high school teachers have done things like enabled students to use a sheet of notes and done, I think, less exam recycling, recognizing that it is critical that you write new exams every year for every class. I know I do that because all your exams are going to show up on the internet. So you need to write new exams. And I also, one question that I had, one thing that's been a huge problem in colleges, and I just don't know if it's a huge problem in high schools, are websites like Chegg and Course Hero, where if you have an extended period of time to do an exam, you can upload questions and then somebody somewhere in the world will, provide the answer. And if you if you pay the $15 monthly fee, you can access all of the stuff on there. And we've had big problems with that. Not just us, like colleges have huge problems with that. Never mind hiring your one-on-one tutor and then having them do your exam problems for you. But I'm just curious, if you have any idea how much of a problem that is, or is that something that isn't a high school issue, it's more a college issue?
I'm going to venture a guess here, just based on what I see coming in front of me in terms of cases of academic dishonesty. I have not seen that, but maybe once or twice in my career where people have gone out and paid sites to be able to get that kind of information. And of course, most of the exams people are taking are, up till this year, been in school, so under the watchful eye of a proctor. When students stay home, I think it lends itself to some other, I'm going to call it opportunities. What I see mostly is, number one is plagiarism. And unfortunately, it's blatant plagiarism, the copy and paste. That's probably number one. And then number two is, is particularly when students have been, let's say, not under the watchful eye directly of a teacher, is, sharing the answers back and forth between two sections, or even a little bit of texting on the side while the exam is going on. We all know that you can look at the screen and you can see somebody's face, but if you can't see their hands are typing an answer on the keyboard, or if they're quickly texting their buddy to tell them the number two's answer is B, which again is another good point why more authentic assessments will lend themselves to encouraging students to do the right thing and to be thinking for themselves and synthesizing answers that make more sense, rather than giving these rote responses. So that's, again, another long-winded answer to a short question. Sorry, Kevin.
Thank you. Paul, you want to move on? Oh, Gianna has a question. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, in thinking about, and to Susie's point, in thinking about, the roots of the problems and the bigger conversation, when that happens or when it continues to happen, we also need to consider, I don't want it to seem like the school and the teachers are the ones that are putting all this pressure and all these expectations on the students, when we know that there's family expectations, we know that there's societal expectations, we know that there's, they're balancing work and soccer and, drama and all their other activities. So moving forward, as part of that conversation, I just want to be careful that we're not saying the school is causing all of this pressure, and that there's a whole lot of factors that go into it.
Thank you, Gianna. Paul, the last section?
Actually, Ryan, I believe that's it.
Homework was very similar. So any other questions on academic dishonesty? We good?
Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you for the presentation. Sorry, go ahead.
Ryan, I would just ask for the committee to take a vote for the acceptance. Ryan, I would just ask for the committee to take a vote for the acceptance. So the changes to the student handbook so that they can be incorporated.
Yeah, so there's not a suggested motion, but I guess the suggested motion would be to approve the changes to the Lhs Student Handbook as presented.
Anybody want to make that motion?
I'll do it. I move that the school committee approve the changes to the Lhs handbook as presented.
There's a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. Gianna?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Nicole?
Yes.
Bradley?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
Susie?
Yes.
And yes for me. Thank you for the work from the folks from the high school. Next up, Marty, is update on in-person learning.
Thank you all. Much appreciated.
Thank you both. Okay. This should be brief. Let's see. Just wanted to take the opportunity to update the committee on our latest hitting their latest milestones with providing more opportunities for in-person learning. So yesterday was an important date for us. Monday, we had welcomed all students back for 5 days a week of in-person learning. So our students in grades 6 through 12 joined the students in grades pre-K through 5 with the opportunity to, if they chose to do so, to join us for 5 days a week of in-person learning. So we're very excited by that, and definitely a sense of normalcy is approaching. And as Kevin mentioned earlier in the meeting, I'd also like to acknowledge the work that the staff and the administrative team did to ready the buildings for the return of students on Monday, and schedules were put in place, and food service arrangements and transportation and desks, and there was quite a bit that needed to happen and it by all accounts went smoothly. We have, this is the pie chart that is hopefully now familiar to you, demonstrating the number of students that are attending 5 days per week versus those students who, for reasons that are important to them, have chosen to remain as remote learners. So about 86% of our students now are attending 5 days per week, with 14% choosing to remain as remote learners. So that red wedge of the pie continues to decrease. Families do understand that in many cases they made selections and commitments that bound them to an arrangement for the final trimester at the middle school or the final term at the high school. So I also had notified families, I know the committee understands this, but worth mentioning again, notified families of a new quarantine protocol that was recommended by the Massachusetts Executive Office of Health and Human Services and the Governor's Medical Advisory Board, and more specifically, the idea that if a student is a close contact of an infected individual, they would not have to quarantine unless they were within 3 feet of the COVID-19 positive individual. This specifically applies to classroom and bus situations. And so it's important, I think, to put that message out once again. This doesn't mean that we won't identify students as close contacts. They in fact would be close contacts, but they wouldn't be subject to the quarantine requirements that we have used throughout the year. So I wanted to once again bring that to the committee's attention and let you know that we continue to meet with town officials on that. Tomorrow morning, this will be part of our administrative agenda, just to understand the implications of this new quarantine protocol. It definitely changes our approach, but it does mean that fewer students would have to quarantine and be out of in-person learning as a result of close contact exposure. So that's it. Just a sort of a brief report for you tonight, just to let you know that we hit the April 26th milestone, welcoming back everybody 5 days a week, and it's going well, and happy to answer any questions that you might have. In your packet and at your desk, there is a detailed version of the pie graph that is presented here. It breaks down by school and by grade level the number of students who are learning in person or learning remotely. So just a brief in-person learning report for you tonight.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions?
Oh, it's not a question. I just wanted to say that that's really impressive. I'm glad so many students were able to have the opportunity to come back 5 days a week. I know a lot of them have been 4 days a week up until this point, but just again, thank you to everyone involved in the entire process of making that happen for the students. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you, Brian. Anybody else? Seeing none. Marty, the next agenda item is the superintendent's report.
Okay. I'll just add a couple of items. The Wolf Swamp principal search is continues to be underway. We did invite a handful of candidates back for a second round of interviews. Those were conducted just before the April vacation, and I'm anticipating that tomorrow we will announce a number of finalists that will be invited to visit Wolf Swamp next week. Be a chance for candidates to visit classrooms, meet with staff, meet with parents in the afternoon. So I think the community and the committee can expect an update on that tomorrow late afternoon. Our middle schools, as we discussed at our last meeting, the Glenbrook and Williams Middle School, they were unfortunately not invited into the MSBA, the Mass School Building Authority's eligibility period to address the facility needs at those two schools. We will be soon asking the committee to review and consider approving new statements of interest. At your May 11th meeting, we'll be seeking some direction, some more specific direction from you on that. I've also reached out to the town manager to ask her for an opportunity for us to present the findings of the Colliers study to the select board. We think it's important to get that information to them as early as possible. At some point, they'll also have to make an informed decision about the statements of interest. It's not just the committee that needs to approve, but the select board would need to approve as well. The deadline for the core program statements of interest is June 25th. And then finally, LHS graduation is still on track. I heard today that the Department of Ed is issuing some graduation guidance tomorrow, which is interesting in that most schools, ours included, have been making graduation plans for the last month or two. So hoping that that guidance doesn't, it hopefully offers us more opportunities rather than creates some restrictions that we have to work around. So we'll find that out tomorrow. The committee is invited to let Principal Landers know if you plan to attend. Might be opportunity for more committee members to be up on the stage. And if that's not the case, certainly committee members would have prominent spots reserved near the stage at the graduation. So if you'll let Principal Landers know, that would be helpful. Then he can proceed with the planning of the staging arrangements. As we discussed, graduation will be held at the stadium field. That is, unless the state graduation guidance throws us a curveball. We don't anticipate that it will, but we've been throwing a lot of curveballs throughout the year. So that's all I have.
Just maybe, sorry, date and time of graduation, have I missed that?
No, I may not have mentioned it specifically. Thursday, June 3rd, I believe it is at 5 p.m., but we'll have to get you I want to fact check that for you, Susie, but it's okay. Late afternoon, Thursday, June 3rd.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, you do? Okay. All right. So there's the fact check. Thank you.
Thanks for the update, Superintendent. I was just curious, it sounds like, with the Wolf Swamp principal search, you're closing in on a couple of candidates. Is there any way to tell us what the diversity makeup is of those candidates?
I think it would be premature. The screening committee is meeting tomorrow to finalize the list. I can tell you that we were very purposeful in the outreach that we did to attract a more diverse applicant pool. And so in the flyers that we created, in the school spring advertisement that we put out there, in some of the social media blasts we put out there, we tried to signal to candidates that we were very interested in recruiting candidates of color for the application process. So I think I will, the best I can tell you is that I'll know more late tomorrow afternoon, Gianna.
Okay, thanks, Superintendent.
Yeah. you.
Next up is my report, and as usual, I just want to reiterate, if you see 86% of our students are coming in person, it's very important for everyone to continue following the changing but still important CDC rules about staying healthy. I did see a report, I think it was today, that a survey found that people aren't washing their hands as much or as well as they did in the early times of the pandemic. So please do your best to stay healthy. Don't send sick kids to school so that we can stay in person and not have to quarantine anybody. And we appreciate the efforts on helping us do that. Student rep report, Maxim.
All right. So I'm going to talk about Lhs. Honor Society is moving forward with board elections, and candidates are in their 2-minute video speeches that I will later for. It's all going to be online. The current board is getting ready to move on, and they sent out a survey asking members of NHS to fill out a survey and suggest anything that can be improved the program for next year. And just in general, this leadership transition is happening. A lot of clubs right now. For example, Jotter has a new editorial board. The Red Cross Club, I heard, has a new board, and just general that's happening as especially as seniors prepare to leave. And then I want to shout out the senior class of 2021 having a senior mortgage board, which so for us, it's actually Regios. If you order from Regios, they give us some percent of the profits today, and then batch ice cream today. If you today batch, they also gave some percent of the profits to us tomorrow. Posto next week on Monday, Tuesday. A portion of those orders go to our class, and Iron Chef next Thursday. So there will be more restaurants and local businesses added in the next week or so. We're really thankful for local businesses helping the senior clout. We missed out on some classic events this year for all the senior class play, which usually brings a lot of money for prom and such. So we're hoping to make that up, and we're thankful for local businesses and for people for going up to support the senior class in this way. And that's it.
Thank you, Maxim. Any reports for LPVC, Bronwyn? Muted.
Thank you. Everyone has it in their packet. I just want to encourage everyone to look at the LPVEC. It's January through March 2021. It's a newsletter. I'm not sure if we can post it to the LPS website, but it's got a lot of great information for every part of the LPVEC. A lot of things going on, plant sale. One thing that was really cool you can see in there is that the graphic art students were somehow, I have to figure out how they were doing that, putting the CTEC logo on masks for the staff and students, which I thought was really exciting. So I just want to encourage everyone to check that out if they have a chance. And Marty, I'm not sure if we can somehow put a link on there through our website, just because it's really interesting and gives a lot of good information about each program. And it's something that's, they just started this year. So I think it's super helpful. Thanks.
Thanks, Bronwyn. Do we have an open space report? Sustainability? And on my agenda, I see finance sub has no report, policy sub. You have some information?
Simply that there's a number of policies that have been posted for public comment, JFABD, JFABE, JFABF, and BEA. And we will be soliciting public comment, and they'll come back to you for review and approval on May 25th.
Thank you. And I see no reports for curriculum or evaluation department, correct? And we have no ongoing business or new business, so I'll entertain a motion.
I move that the school committee meet in executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, purpose to conduct a strategy session in preparation with collective bargaining with Unit A, and purpose 7, consideration of release of executive session minutes of previous meetings, not to reconvene into open session.
Is there a second?
Second.
So again, the motion is to move, to meet an executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Purpose 2, to conduct a strategy session in preparation with collective bargaining with Unit A, and Purpose 7, consideration of release of executive session minutes of previous meetings, not to reconvene into open session. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. Kevin?
Yes.
Bronwyn?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
Susie?
Yes.
Nicole?
Yes.
Tiana?
Yes.
And yes for me. We are adjourned from our public meeting and we'll be going to executive session. Thank you.